The sun filtered through the dense canopy of the Amazon rainforest, creating patches of golden light on the jungle floor. Dr. Maya Rivera wiped sweat from her forehead as she checked her GPS again. Her team was venturing farther than any of their previous expeditions. 3 weeks into a journey that had started as a routine study of native plants used by local tribes. Maya was an anthropologist who had spent the last decade studying indigenous communities in South America. At 38, she had earned a reputation for being thorough and respectful in her research. This expedition was supposed to be like any other. Document plant usage, record oral histories, and observe cultural practices. But nothing could have prepared her for what lay ahead. "We should set up camp soon," called out Luis, her trusted guide and friend of 7 years. Behind them, 3 research assistants nodded in agreement, their faces showing the fatigue of hiking through difficult terrain all day. "Just a little farther," Maya replied, pointing to her map. The satellite images showed a clearing about half a mile ahead. "Should be perfect." The group pushed forward, machetes occasionally needed to clear particularly stubborn vines. The sounds of the jungle surrounded them, birds calling, insects buzzing, and somewhere in the distance the low rumble of water. This deep in the Amazon, they were at least 80 miles from the nearest village and nearly 200 from any major city. Luis suddenly stopped walking. "Do you see that?" he asked, pointing through a gap in the trees. Maya squinted in the direction he indicated. At first she saw nothing unusual, just more jungle. Then, as the wind moved the branches slightly, she caught a glimpse of something reflecting the sunlight, something metallic. "That's strange," she said, adjusting her path toward the reflection. "Probably old equipment from a logging operation." As they got closer, the group fell silent. What they were seeing made no sense. Rising above the tree line was something massive, a structure so out of place it seemed impossible. "That can't be what I think it is," whispered Anna, one of the research assistants who specialized in botany. But it was. As they pushed through the last layer of vegetation, the entire team froze in collective shock. Before them, partially covered in vines and tilted at an angle, was the unmistakable hull of a cruise ship. The vessel was enormous, at least 12 stories tall and longer than a football field. The once white paint was now stained with rust and mold, but the name was still visible near the bow, Aurora Maris. "This is impossible," Maya said, her scientific mind racing to find a logical explanation. "We're almost 200 miles inland. There's no way a ship this size could be here." The team stood in stunned silence for several minutes, simply taking in the surreal sight. Birds had made nests in the ship's railings, and thick vines wrapped around its hull like nature was trying to pull it into the earth. Several sections had been damaged, whether from the journey to this impossible location or from years of exposure to the elements. It was hard to tell. "We need to document everything," Maya finally said, snapping out of her shock. "Photos, videos, measurements. Nobody is going to believe this without solid evidence." The team quickly set up camp in a small clearing about 50 yards from the ship. As the others prepared equipment, Maya pulled out her satellite phone to call their research center. To her frustration, she couldn't get a signal, the thick canopy and remote location blocking the connection. "We'll try again from higher ground tomorrow," she told the others. "For now, let's focus on recording what we can before dark." As the afternoon progressed, they circled the entire ship, taking hundreds of photos. The massive vessel rested at a 30-degree angle, its starboard side partially buried in mud and earth. Huge tree roots had grown around the hull, some as thick as a person's waist, suggesting the ship had been there for many years. "Look at this," called Diego, the team's photographer. He pointed to a section of exposed metal near the waterline. "These are registration numbers, and a port of origin, Miami, Florida." Maya examined the markings. "We need to cross-reference these when we get back to civilization. Maybe we can figure out when this ship disappeared." As the sun began to set, Maya sat on a fallen log, reviewing the day's notes and trying to make sense of what they'd found. A cruise ship, designed for open ocean, somehow transported nearly 200 miles inland through dense jungle, with no clear path of how it got there. It defied all logical explanation. That night, as the team sat around their small camp stove eating dinner, theories flew back and forth. "Maybe it was carried by a tsunami," suggested Anna. Luis shook his head. "No tsunami could carry something this big this far inland, and it would have destroyed everything in its path." What about a massive flood? Diego offered. The Amazon basin floods every year. Not enough to float a cruise ship, Maya replied. And even if it did somehow float this far during historic flooding, the water would have receded, leaving it stranded much closer to the river. The conversation continued long into the night, each theory sounding more far-fetched than the last. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and one by one, the team retired to their tents. Maya stayed up later than the others, her headlamp illuminating her journal as she wrote detailed notes about their discovery. She sketched the ship's position relative to the surrounding landscape and listed all the questions they needed to answer. How did it get here? When did it arrive? Where were all the people who should have been aboard? Just as she was about to turn in, she noticed something she hadn't seen in the fading light of evening. A faint glow coming from one of the ship's lower decks. It was barely visible, just a dim light behind what appeared to be a porthole. Maya blinked and rubbed her eyes, sure she was seeing things. But the light remained. Somehow, somewhere on that abandoned ship there was still power. Sleep did not come easily that night. Every time Maya closed her eyes, she saw the impossible ship looming in the jungle. Her scientific training demanded rational explanations, but nothing about this discovery followed the rules of logic or physics. At first light, the team was already up and preparing for a closer inspection of the vessel. Their plan was to find a way inside if possible, though safety was a major concern. The structural integrity of a ship that had been in the jungle for years was questionable at best. "We'll need to be extremely careful," Maya told the group as they gathered their equipment. "No one goes anywhere alone, and we all stay within shouting distance." As morning mist curled around the ship's lower decks, they approached with a mixture of scientific curiosity and nervous anticipation. Up close, the Aurora Maris was even more impressive and eerie. Barnacles still clung to the lower hull, now dry and dead far from their ocean home. "I found something in our database," Anna said, showing Maya her tablet. "The Aurora Maris was reported missing in 2011. It disappeared during a hurricane off the coast of Brazil with over 2,000 passengers and crew aboard." Maya stared at the article. Then back at the ship. That was 14 years ago. And it says there was no distress call, no debris found. The ship just vanished. "Until now," Luis said quietly. The implications were staggering. If this was indeed the missing Aurora Maris, then what happened to all those people? And how did a 100,000-ton cruise ship travel inland through dense jungle without leaving a path of destruction? As Maya snapped photos of the ship's registration number to confirm it was the same vessel, she noticed something odd about the surrounding vegetation. The oldest trees around the ship had grown in unusual patterns, curving around the hull as if the ship had simply materialized in their midst rather than crashing through. "It's like it just appeared here," she murmured to herself. The team spent the morning searching for a way inside. Most of the external doors were either rusted shut or blocked by debris. By midday, they had circled the entire vessel twice without finding a viable entrance. "There," Diego suddenly said, pointing to a section near the stern. "That looks like a service entrance, and it's partly open." The door he indicated was about 15 feet up from the ground, accessible via a section of hull that sloped gently due to the ship's angle. Vines had grown across the opening but hadn't completely sealed it. Maya felt her heart racing as they carefully made their way toward the entrance. This wasn't just a remarkable scientific discovery anymore. It was a mystery that challenged everything she thought she knew about the physical world. And somewhere within that massive steel structure might be answers to what had really happened to the Aurora Maris and everyone aboard. As they reached the rusted service door, Maya took a deep breath. Whatever they found inside would change everything. For them, for science, and for the families of those who had disappeared with the ship 14 years ago. With a nod to her team, she pulled back the vines, revealing the dark passage into the impossible ship in the jungle. The rusted service door groaned as Maya and Luis pushed against it. Years of jungle growth had nearly sealed it shut, but with a final heave, the metal gave way with a sound like a dying animal. The sudden movement sent a small cloud of dust and dry leaves swirling into the dark interior. "Everyone put on your masks," Maya instructed, pulling her own face covering into place. "We don't know what kind of air quality or mold growth we might find inside." The team switched on their headlamps and flashlights, creating cones of light that cut through the darkness. The beams revealed a narrow service corridor, its walls lined with pipes and electrical conduits. What struck Maya immediately was the lack of jungle invasion inside. Unlike the exterior, which nature had begun to reclaim, the interior seemed eerily preserved, as if sealed in a time capsule. "Look at this," Anna whispered, her voice hushed with wonder. She pointed to a small red light blinking on a control panel near the entrance. "There's still power somewhere in this ship." "That's impossible," Diego said, moving closer to examine it. "This ship has been here for years. Any backup batteries would have died long ago." "Unless it has a solar system," Luis suggested. "Cruise ships this size often have supplementary solar panels for emergency power." Maya nodded, remembering the faint light she'd seen from their camp the previous night. "Some of those panels must still be functioning, though I can't imagine how after all these years in the jungle." The corridor stretched ahead, sloping slightly due to the ship's tilted position. The team moved forward cautiously, documenting everything with photos and video. The air inside was stale but breathable, with a faint metallic smell and the musty scent of abandonment. "The main hallway should be to our right," Maya said, consulting a cruise ship layout she'd downloaded to her tablet before losing satellite connection. That would lead us toward the passenger areas. As they turned the corner, they were greeted by a surprising sight. Emergency lights glowed dimly along the ceiling every 20 feet or so, casting a pale bluish light that mixed with their flashlight beams. The effect was ghostly, illuminating a wide corridor that would have once bustled with passengers. "The emergency system is still running," Diego said, voice filled with disbelief. That's not normal." Maya ran her hand along a wall, feeling the smooth surface interrupted occasionally by framed artwork, landscapes and seaside scenes now faded and water-damaged. "Nothing about this is normal," she replied. The hallway led them to a central atrium that would have been the heart of the ship's social activity. A grand staircase swept upward to higher decks while glass elevators stood frozen in their shafts. The ceiling, once glass to let in sunlight, was now partially covered by jungle growth, allowing dappled rays to penetrate and create shifting patterns on the marble floor. What struck the team most was how orderly everything appeared. There were no signs of panic or chaos, no overturned furniture, no abandoned personal belongings strewn about. "It looks like everyone just left," Anna said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "Like they all calmly walked away." "Or were taken," Luis added quietly. Maya approached the reception desk that stood at the center of the atrium. Behind it, computers sat dark and silent, and a sign still welcomed guests to their tropical cruise. She found a guest manifest in a leather binder, its pages slightly warped from humidity but still legible. According to this, there were now 852 passengers and 617 crew members aboard, she told the others as she carefully turned the pages. "Almost 2,500 people, and no trace of any of them," Diego said, scanning the empty space with his camera. "No remains, no signs of injury or struggle." The implications hung in the air, unspoken but weighing on all of them. Over 2,000 people had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a perfectly intact cruise ship in an impossible location. "We should split into two groups," Maya decided after a moment. "Luis and Anna check the lower deck, engine room storage areas. Diego and I will go up one level to the passenger cabins. We'll meet back here in 1 hour. Use the radios if you find anything significant." With a plan in place, the team set off in different directions. Maya and Diego ascended the grand staircase, their footsteps eerily loud in the silence. The second level contained rows of passenger cabins, each door closed but unlocked. Maya hesitated before opening the first door. "We need to be respectful," she told Diego. These were people's private spaces. Inside, they found a standard cruise cabin, 2 beds neatly made, suitcases stored under them, personal items arranged on the small desk and bathroom counter. A jacket hung on a hook by the door, and a pair of reading glasses sat on the nightstand next to an outdated paperback novel. "It's like they stepped out for dinner and never came back," Diego said, photographing the room without disturbing anything. They checked several more cabins, finding similar scenes in each one. In some, there were signs of occupancy. An open book, a half-empty water bottle, a child's stuffed animal left on a pillow. But no indication of what had happened to the people themselves. In one suite, they found something that made Maya pause. A travel journal. Its last entry dated October 17, 2011. She read aloud, "Strange electrical storms tonight. Captain says not to worry, but many of us have noticed the unusual lights in the sky. Ship's entertainment canceled for the evening due to unexplained technical difficulties with the sound system. Hearing strange sounds like whispering coming through the speakers." Maya and Diego exchanged glances. "The ship disappeared on October 18th, she said quietly. This was written the night before. Meanwhile, Luis and Ana had made their way to the engine room, finding it in pristine condition. The massive engine stood silent, showing no damage or signs of malfunction. "This doesn't make sense," Luis said, examining the control panels. "If the ship ran aground or was somehow transported here, there should be evidence of catastrophic system failure." Ana pointed to a digital readout that still glowed faintly on one panel. According to this, the engines weren't running when they shut down. They were deliberately powered down in a controlled sequence. When the team reconvened in the atrium an hour later, they shared their findings, each discovery adding to the mystery rather than solving it. "We need to check the bridge," Maya said. "If there are answers anywhere on this ship, they'll be there." The bridge was located on one of the highest decks, requiring them to climb several flights of stairs since the elevators weren't functioning. By the time they reached it, the afternoon light was beginning to fade, streaming through the windows at a low angle and casting long shadows across the navigation equipment. Unlike the rest of the ship, the bridge showed signs of activity in its final moments. Charts were spread across tables, coffee cups sat half empty, and the captain's logbook lay open on the main console. Maya approached it reverently, her hands trembling slightly as she turned to the final entries. The others gathered around, flashlights directed at the pages as she began to read. October 17, 2011, 22:45. Electrical systems experiencing unexplained fluctuations. Navigation equipment showing contradictory readings. Our position cannot be verified. Unusual atmospheric conditions continuing. October 18, 2011, 01:30. Phenomenon intensifying. Radio contact lost with all vessels and shore stations. Crew reports strange lights surrounding the ship. Passengers being instructed to remain in cabins as precaution. October 18, 2011, 03:15. The displacement has begun. God help us all. The final entry ended there, the pen trailing off the page as if the writer had been interrupted. Maya stared at the words, particularly the last line. "The displacement? What does that mean?" "Look at this," Luis called from the navigation station. He was pointing to a radar image that had been printed and circled in red marker. It showed the ship surrounded by a perfect circle of what appeared to be electrical activity. As the team studied the bridge documents, Diego wandered over to the windows, looking out at the jungle canopy that now surrounded the ship instead of open ocean. The sun was setting, painting the scene in gold and deep shadow. "Maya," he called suddenly, his voice urgent. "You need to see this." She joined him at the window, following his gaze to what appeared to be a clearing about half a mile from the ship. Even from this distance and in the fading light, the pattern was unmistakable. A perfect circle of flattened trees and vegetation, as if something massive had landed there. "It's the same shape as the radar image," Maya whispered. The discovery added another layer to the already baffling mystery. Whatever had happened to the Aurora Maris hadn't been a natural phenomenon, at least. Not one that science could currently explain. As darkness fell over the jungle, the team decided to return to their camp outside the ship. None of them felt comfortable spending the night inside the vessel, surrounded by the belongings of people who had vanished without a trace. Back at camp, they huddled around their small fire, trying to make sense of what they'd found. The ship was intact, with no signs of damage that would explain its inland location. The power systems were partially functioning through solar backup. The final communication suggested some kind of event. The displacement had occurred, and now they'd discovered a circular clearing that matched a radar image from the ship's final hours. "Whatever happened here," Maya said, looking toward the dark silhouette of the cruise ship barely visible now through the trees. "It wasn't just a shipwreck or a natural disaster. Something else occurred, something none of us have a framework to understand." Ana hugged her knees to her chest, staring into the fire. "Do you think the people are still alive somewhere?" No one answered. The question hung in the night air, along with another unspoken concern. If whatever happened to the Aurora Maris and its passengers had occurred once, could it happen again? Maya looked down at her notes, then back at the ship looming in the darkness. Tomorrow they would need to go deeper, to the lower decks they hadn't yet explored, and somehow she knew that what they would find there would be even more shocking than what they'd discovered today. Morning arrived with the chattering of monkeys and the distant calls of tropical birds. Maya opened her eyes inside her tent, momentarily disoriented until the events of yesterday came flooding back. She unzipped the tent flap and peered out at the massive hull of the Aurora Maris, gleaming dully in the early light. It hadn't been a dream after all. The team gathered over a simple breakfast of instant coffee and energy bars, planning their approach for the day. "We need to be systematic," Maya told them. "Today we'll focus on the main passenger areas, dining hall, entertainment sections, medical bay. We need to document everything exactly as we find it." Diego held up his camera. "I've switched to the larger memory cards. We won't run out of space." Anna looked nervous as she packed her sample collection kit. "Do you think we should be taking things from the ship? It feels like, I don't know, disturbing a grave or something." Maya understood her concern. "We'll be respectful, but this is also potentially the scientific discovery of our lifetime. Small samples for analysis are necessary, especially anything that might help explain how the ship got here." By 8 a.m. they were back inside the vessel, the morning sun streaming through breaks in the ceiling where jungle plants had created skylights of sorts. They decided to start with the main dining hall located on the third deck. The grand entrance to the dining room featured ornate double doors with brass handles shaped like dolphins. Inside, the scene took their breath away. Dozens of tables set with fine china, crystal glasses, and silverware. White tablecloths draped each table, now yellowed with age and spotted with mold in places. Centerpieces of artificial flowers gathered dust in the still air. But what truly stunned the team was evidence that dinner had been in progress when whatever happened occurred. Plates held food, now dried and mummified by time in various stages of consumption. Wine glasses contained residue of what had once been expensive Cabernet. At one table, a fork remained poised over a plate, as if its owner had been interrupted mid-bite. "This is beyond strange," Luis whispered, his voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silent room. "It looks like hundreds of people just vanished in the middle of dinner." Maya approached a server station where a computer still displayed the evening's menu. October 17th, 2011, Captain's formal dinner. She took photos of everything, trying to process what she was seeing. "No signs of panic," Diego noted, pointing his camera at the orderly scene. "No overturned tables, no broken dishes. If there was an emergency, you'd expect chaos." Anna had put on gloves and was carefully examining one of the plates. "The food has fossilized rather than decomposed normally," she observed. "I need to take samples to understand how that's possible." As the team moved methodically through the massive dining hall, the strangeness of the scene only deepened. At one table, a champagne bottle sat in an ice bucket, the water long evaporated but leaving mineral deposits behind. At another, a birthday cake with 14 candles waited to be served. "Happy birthday, Zoe," still legible in hardened frosting. "People don't just abandon celebrations like this," Luis said, taking environmental readings with a handheld device. "Not unless they have absolutely no choice." Maya found herself drawn to a large table near a window, apparently reserved for the ship's officers. Name cards identified the seats for the captain, first officer, chief engineer, and others. Their plates, too, held partially eaten meals, their napkins neatly placed beside them. "They were all here," she said quietly. "Not at their post, not managing an emergency. Whatever happened, it either wasn't seen as a crisis, or it happened too suddenly for anyone to react." After documenting the dining hall thoroughly, they moved on to the main entertainment area, a theater that could seat over 500 passengers. The stage was set for what appeared to be a magic show, props arranged and curtains open. The seats were empty, but programs lay on many of them, open to various pages. The show was scheduled for 9 p.m., Diego said, reading a poster near the entrance. After dinner, it never took place. The team continued their exploration, finding similar scenes throughout the public areas of the ship. Activities interrupted, spaces abandoned in the middle of use, but with no indication of fear or panic. In the ship's casino, cards remained dealt at poker tables, chips stacked neatly in front of empty chairs. Slot machines displayed jackpots frozen in time, their digital displays long dead. In the spa, treatment rooms were prepared with towels and oils laid out for clients who never arrived. By midday, they reached the medical center, a modern facility that would have been equipped to handle most emergencies short of major surgery. The reception area was empty, but Maya found the patient log open on the desk. October 17th, 14:30. Multiple patients reporting headaches, disorientation, and hearing unusual sounds, she read aloud. Ship's doctor has prescribed mild sedatives and recommended rest in cabins. They pushed through to the treatment rooms, finding 3 beds occupied not by people, but by indentations in the mattresses and blankets pulled back, as if whoever had been lying there had simply gotten up and walked away. "Look at this," Anna called from a small laboratory attached to the medical center. She was holding a glass slide under a battery-powered portable microscope she'd brought from their equipment. "There's blood on this slide. It was in the middle of being analyzed when it was abandoned." Louise peered through the microscope. "The cellular structure is... I've never seen anything like it. The red blood cells appear to be vibrating somehow, even after all these years." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "Take samples. Lots of them. This might be crucial." As afternoon wore on, they found their way to the ship's security office, a small room filled with monitors and recording equipment. Most of it was dark and dead, but one computer still had power from the emergency system. Diego, who had some experience with computer systems, managed to access the security logs. "There's video from the night of October 17th, he said, his voice tight with anticipation. "Should I play it?" The team gathered around the small screen as Diego pulled up the footage. It showed various areas of the ship. The dining hall filled with people enjoying their meals, passengers walking along corridors, crew members at their stations. Everything appeared normal until 23:47, when the timestamps on all cameras simultaneously began to glitch. "Look at that," Maya said, pointing to the screen. In every camera view at exactly the same moment, all the people aboard paused whatever they were doing and looked up, as if hearing something. Some put their hands to their ears. Others appeared to be speaking, though there was no audio on the recording, and then at 23:52, the truly inexplicable happened. A soft blue-white light began to fill each frame, growing in intensity until it washed out all details. When the light faded 30 seconds later, every single person had vanished. Plates clattered to tables in the dining hall. A glass fell from a now empty hand at the bar. A child's toy dropped to the floor in a corridor. But the people were gone. All of them. The footage continued for another minute, showing the empty ship before all cameras went dark simultaneously. No one spoke for several long moments. The implications of what they'd just seen were too enormous, too outside the realm of scientific understanding. "It wasn't just the people," Anna finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you notice? All the potted plants disappeared too, and the fish in that aquarium in the lobby. Anything living." Luis nodded slowly, but not their belongings, not the ship itself. Maya rewound the footage, watching again as the strange light engulfed the vessel and its inhabitants. "This is what the captain's log called the displacement," she said. "But displaced to where?" They spent the next hour searching for more security footage, but found nothing else of significance. As the day waned, they made their way back toward the main atrium, processing what they'd discovered. "We should check the crew quarters next," Maya suggested, "and then the bridge again. I want to see if there's any connection between that circular clearing we spotted and what happened in the security footage." As they crossed the atrium, Diego suddenly stopped, pointing toward the purser's desk. "That drawer is open now." "I'm sure it was closed when we came through earlier." Maya approached cautiously. The drawer was indeed partially open, though it could have simply slid open due to the ship's tilted position. Inside, she found a leather-bound book labeled Incident Reports. She carefully removed it and opened to the last few entries. What she read made her blood run cold. October 15th, 2011. 3 passengers reported seeing figures outside their cabin windows. Security reminded them we are in the middle of the ocean and this is impossible. Noted that all 3 had consumed significant amounts of alcohol. October 16th, 2011. Chief engineer reports unusual power fluctuations throughout the ship. Cause cannot be identified. Communications officer notes intermittent static on all radio channels. October 17th, 2011. Multiple passengers and crew reporting headaches and whispers in their cabins. Ship's doctor overwhelmed with cases. Captain has called emergency meeting with senior staff. The final entry was dated October 17th, 23:40. just minutes before the strange light appeared in the security footage. "They're here." Maya closed the book, her hands trembling slightly. "We need to get back to camp and review everything we've found," she told the others. "And tomorrow we need to find that circular clearing we saw from the bridge. I think whatever happened to these people, it started there." As they exited the ship into the late afternoon jungle heat, none of them noticed the faint blue glow that briefly illuminated one of the windows high above them, nor the shadowy figure that appeared to watch their departure before fading from view. That night at camp, no one slept well. The security footage played over and over in Maya's mind. The blue-white light, the sudden disappearance of every living being aboard the ship. It defied all scientific explanation, yet she had seen it with her own eyes. Before dawn, she was already awake, reviewing their findings by flashlight. "We need to investigate that circular clearing today," she told the others over breakfast. "And then find a way into the lower decks, the cargo holds." Luis studied the ship schematic they'd found. According to this, there are cargo areas that take up almost a third of the lower hull. That's unusual for a passenger vessel. "Maybe not so unusual if the cruise was just a cover for something else," Diego suggested, pouring the last of their coffee into mugs. Ana had been quieter than usual, examining samples she'd collected from the dining hall and medical bay. "The organic material is showing strange properties," she said, looking up from her portable microscope. "The cellular structures appear to have been altered at a fundamental level." After breakfast, they gathered their gear and set off through the jungle toward the circular clearing they'd spotted from the bridge. The hike was difficult, requiring them to cut through dense undergrowth with machetes. After nearly 2 hours of sweating through the humid air, they finally reached the edge of the perfectly circular area. Standing at its perimeter, Maya felt a sense of unease wash over her. The clearing was roughly 200 feet in diameter. Every tree and plant within its boundary flattened outward, as if by an immense force. Yet, unlike a normal impact site, there was no crater at the center, just flat, undisturbed ground covered in dead vegetation. "It's like something hovered here," Luis said, voicing what they were all thinking. "Something big." Diego walked the perimeter, taking photographs. "The pattern is too perfect to be natural. And look at this." He pointed to several trees at the edge of the circle that weren't just flattened but appeared twisted, their trunks corkscrewed in impossible ways. Maya moved cautiously toward the center of the clearing, her skin prickling with goosebumps despite the heat. When she reached the middle, she knelt down and placed her palm against the soil. It felt oddly cool compared to the surrounding jungle. "There's something here," she called to the others. "The ground feels different." Ana joined her, bringing sampling tools. As they brushed away the dead leaves and surface debris, they uncovered a layer of what appeared to be fine, glassy black sand that definitely didn't belong in the Amazon basin. "This isn't natural to this region," Ana said, carefully collecting samples. "It almost looks like volcanic glass, but chemically altered somehow." As they continued to examine the clearing, Luis made another discovery, a small metallic object half buried at the edge of the circle. It was about the size of a coin, but perfectly square, with strange symbols etched into its surface. "It's not from the ship," he said, turning it over in his gloved hand. "The material doesn't match anything we've seen on board." They spent another hour documenting the clearing before heading back toward the Aurora Maris. The ship waited for them, its impossible presence a constant reminder that they had stepped into something beyond normal understanding. "We need to find a way into the cargo holds," Maya said as they approached the vessel. "If the ship was involved in something secret, that's where we'll find answers." Using the schematic, they located a service elevator shaft that would lead down to the cargo decks. The elevator itself wasn't operational, but there was a maintenance ladder running the height of the shaft. One by one, they climbed down, their headlamps creating dancing shadows on the metal walls. 4 decks down, they reached a heavy security door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Unlike the other doors they had encountered, this one featured an electronic keypad lock that still had power. "Great," Diego muttered. "How are we supposed to get past that?" Maya examined the keypad closely. "Look at these keys. Some are more worn than others. The 2, 5, 7, and 9 have been used most often." Luis nodded. 4 digits, probably. But that still gives us too many combinations to try manually. Maya thought for a moment, then pulled out the captain's logbook they'd found on the bridge. She flipped through the pages, scanning for numbers. October 17th, 2011. The date everything happened. Try 1711. Diego punched in the numbers, but the keypad flashed red. Not that simple, I guess. Wait, Anna said. The incident report mentioned an emergency meeting with senior staff. What if we try the date backward, like a military-style date code? Luis entered 1117 into the keypad. There was a moment of silence, then a soft click as the security door unlocked. Nice thinking, Maya said, as they pushed the heavy door open. The corridor beyond was different from the rest of the ship. Gone were the carpeted floors and decorative walls of the passenger areas, replaced by utilitarian metal grating and pipes running along the ceiling. Emergency lights cast a pale blue glow over everything. This doesn't look like standard cargo storage, Luis whispered as they moved forward.